on the line has been put forward to talk on behalf of the church, which is the St Mary's Ancient Church of the East, the Victorian Senate candidate for Australian Christians, Vickie Janson. Good morning.
Good morning, Neil. How are you?
I'm okay, but I don't get it. What's the problem? Don't we accept all?
Well,
as
yes,
Christians?
absolutely. The problem is that it's just not a normal situation, this particular church, and I guess they're looking for some space on compassionate grounds. This is a church that is predominantly over 90% are refugees. They're survivors of war and terror, of some of the worst kind, many undergoing counselling for trauma, of torture and so forth. That's sort of, really horrific stuff. And of course, they're just asking for compassionate grounds because of the likelihood of this whole situation will trigger the trauma that they've had to experience, and there's just a deep conflict there. So,
whoa, hang on. How does a legal, legitimate mosque run by legal, legitimate, decent people in legal, legitimate Australia relate to the atrocities internationally? And torture.
What we're talking about is the mental health of survivors of war and terror. We're talking about trying to give them a little bit of space, and that's all we're talking about. They are not opposed to the mosque. They're opposed to the proximity. We're talking about right in their window, adjacent to the church, a 26.5-metre minaret towering over them. These are people that are still recovering and just need a little bit of space to heal. So this is not, they've come here to have some space to heal, and they want to work.
But they've also come here because this is a democratic and peaceful society. Do they understand that the mosque is not there to attack them?
Well, unfortunately, the bombs are still going off in Iraq every single day.
But what's that got to do with Coolaroo?
Well, actually, there's a lot to do with Coolaroo. You're not detached from, if your relatives are being persecuted in another country, you're not detached from it. We're asking for a little bit of grace and mercy and compassion towards a group that have suffered terribly, and they are traumatised.
But I would hope that they would understand that the people they're objecting to are not necessarily supporters of any of the awful things that have happened to them, and they're not a threat to them.
They're not saying that they are. They're asking for compassionate grounds because of the triggers. I mean, they have got women that will be too scared to go to the church. Now, I'm not saying we're not... Because of their experiences, they are needing space to recover from trauma.
But I still don't understand how do their experiences relate to a mosque in Coolaroo?
Well, obviously, Neil, you don't understand how trauma triggers work. It can be the.
I'm sorry. What don't I understand?
How trauma triggers actually work. It's a mental health issue. Sometimes if people have had, for example, quite apart from any religious thing, if somebody is sexually attacked, there'll be something in that experience. Let me just finish, please.
I think that's
you don't understand trauma triggers.
All right, you don't understand that I'm actually running the interview, not you. And the point is, let's not go off on the issue of sexual assault and everything like that. I
was trying to explain what a trauma trigger is. Some people have experienced these things.
Okay. Let's go back a step. What about these people being tortured in mosques?
No, we are talking about triggers that are symbolised. These
what are the
symbols
triggers?
of things. A trigger is something that triggers an experience.
What is a trigger in this case?
Well, the sights and sound are the normal ways of the senses to trigger trauma, and so the sight of a minaret is to them quite traumatic because they are, if you look at any Middle Eastern situation, a lot of the attacks on churches and Christians and persecution, even now in Egypt as we speak, happens after Friday prayers. There is an association for someone who has suffered in that way. And so there is an association with the mosque, and it's not to demonise Muslim people. It's to say, can they just have a bit of space?
For heaven's sake, what do you think the effect is here on the people? You say it's not to demonise them, but you're saying you can't have a mosque here because it reminds us of terrorism and murder and torture. What do you think the effect of that is on them?
I think that you're being rather shallow if you don't understand the impact of this kind of trauma on people, and this is an area of research.
I'm shallow and I'm probably anti-Christian too, am I? I mean, for heaven's sake, all I'm trying to do is get to the bottom of it. And
let's talk about it in planning terms. You get two volatile communities and you put them right next door
to
each other. They're both volatile communities.
In what way?
Because they have a long history that is just not eradicated because you've, shipped over to Australia.
So we've got the people at the church are actually dangerous to people in the mosque, and the people in the mosque are dangerous to people in the church, are they?
Well, I can tell you that these people have been persecuted minorities in Iraq for centuries, and there is a long history there, and there are a lot of hurt people, and they just request a bit of space. They're not anti-Muslim, I can guarantee you that.
But you just told me they're volatile. What do you mean by that? You're saying the people in the church are volatile. What do you mean? The people in the mosque are volatile.
You can stop functioning. We have people on welfare because of mental health issues.
You're talking about volatile. What do you mean?
Well, if you don't know, look it up in the dictionary. It means you are likely to be triggered into a state of mental illness. Yeah. That's what it means.
Volatile means likely to be triggered into a state of mental illness.
Well, yes, mental depression, suicide, these things, really, Neil, these things are happening. If anyone suffers trauma, there are triggers that set you back, and we're just asking for a little bit of space, that's all.
Is it possible that the people in the mosque are being traumatised as well?
Look...
Is it not possible?
Of course it is, and then they should understand. They should understand, but we are talking about 30% of these people are elderly. Then you've got a lot of young youth who are looking at the news every day, seeing what's happening over, in Iraq, in the Middle East. It would be naive to think that none of this has any social impact. Then you've got the locals who have nothing to do with the church. No, you've got nothing to do with the church, who are very concerned. They can see the social impact. They can see what's going to happen. And the point is that we have, room in the planning to account for it, because Section 60 of the Planning and Environment Act allows for consideration of significant adverse social effects. So we're all talking about cultural sensitivity. What about a little bit of sensitivity for this group of refugees?
Okay. This is Australia. What about putting as much as we can, all the hatred you talk about going back centuries, to one side? And what about people who represent Christian church saying one of the Christian principles is that we all get on well together and turn the other cheek and love thy neighbour, etc. What about loving your neighbour as long as it's not a mosque?
Neil, that is actually the message, and they're asking for that space to recover and get along. That's what they want. They want a little space to recover. Everybody needs to recover. You don't just one day leave a country and let you need time to heal.
How long before they can have a mosque there?
Well, that's exactly what our Harmony team at the council said. When will you get over it? But we have people that are still suffering, still have relatives missing. This is really current. What about a little bit of mercy?
Have you spoken to anybody from the mosque?
Yeah, well, I heard the speakers from the mosque last night, and they seem quite reasonable people. We're just asking for a little bit of compassion and space, that's all.
Have you attempted to negotiate it with anybody from the mosque?
The mosque and the church have had discussions, yes.
And have you met any of these people?
Well, as I said, I was at the meeting last night.
That's not an answer. Have you met and discussed with any of these people?
Well, not me personally, but the individual, the priests at the church and the council members have. They have met them. They have talked to them.
Okay, and there's no way of negotiating this through in the decent, peaceful way, which one would hope is representative of both basic Islam, basic Christianity, and this country.
Look, can I just give you an example, Neil? You've just got angry and blown up at me. Can you imagine, with the history that these guys have got, how they're going to negotiate this? They need some space. That's all. It's not rocket science. It's basic, healing time. We have to give them a little bit of space.
Okay, you haven't talked to people in the mosque. You've talked to some of the refugees, though.
Well, there isn't a mosque there to talk to someone there. There isn't a mosque. It's a vacant block of land, Neil.
Okay, the people who want to build the mosque, you haven't spoken to them. Have you talked?
The church has. I am just being a voice for the church now, but I haven't had to speak to them because they have had those talks.
Have you spoken to some of the refugees who are so worried about the mosque?
Not ones that are worried for the mosque. I speak to refugees all day long, and I don't care what religion they are. I know lots of refugees.
You misunderstand. Have you spoken to some of the refugees who are opposed to the mosque?
Have I spoken to the refugees who are opposed to the mosque? Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you very much for speaking to us. Vickie Janson, Victorian Senate candidate for the Australian Christians.